Good evening. You're listening live to the Extreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob, broadcasting to you as always from the Extreme Studios in the Pinellas Palace, just west of Orlando, Florida. It's a nice, balmy 100-degree Fahrenheit day here, but it's a dry 100 heat as June marches on here in the summer. We're covering, of course, on Extreme TV, where we cover a particular episode of a TV series, season one, typically, unless, of course, you're Twin Peaks or, say, Dark Shadows Revival. I'm here with the young 20-something Professor Pixel, and we're going to be covering Columbo season one. And as we decided to do this with Columbo, the Peter Falk detective, we did the episodes, and there was such an outcry to say, hey, why don't you jabronis do the first two pilot TV movies? That we said, you know what? We'll do that. Even though I have Max and Daisy, my German, Czechoslovakian, short-haired, red, non-working line shepherds patrolling the 5-acre palatial estate here, keeping us safe from all the nonsense that goes out there to allow the stream to continue. I got to ask you, Pixel, down in your part of South Orlando, it's probably equally hot and steamy, is it not?
It is far too hot, sir.
The reason why I'm bringing that up is because Orlando being a very progressive town, I mentioned before how Columbo's got some feminist things to it, especially the last episode. And tonight's episode, the second episode, the second pilot, as it were, was in 1971. It's got a big budget feel to it. I got to tell you, I thought Lee Grant was just absolutely marvelous in here. I think she is obviously something that we're going to be talking about. Generally speaking, we talk about the strength of the villain, as it were, in addition to some of the other things too about it. I know some people like the soundtrack to this and how it looks like a movie because it does look and feel like a movie. But boy, there's some really horrible things in this episode too. So it's really rough for me because Lee Grant's very seductive in her role, very strong, very powerful, very pro-feminine, if you will. And I guess sit there and say this is a very up and down episode for me. It's not pretty good except for one or two things. There's some glaring positives, some glaring negatives. And I want to hear what your initial thoughts are, sir.
Oh, really? I enjoyed it. I don't know. Maybe because it does feel a bit different to what we'll get in the series and the one before. It's still different enough that it's interesting to see. And Columbo being Columbo he's closer to what he is meant to be, and that's great. But I mean, I guess we should go ahead and start off, unless you have anything more to say.
No, I think what's interesting is the fact that we covered season one, and now we're just doing the two pilots in front of it. We kind of know some of the templates of what to expect, so we'll just talk about that in a very, very deep time. Our guest that's been with us, okay, had a previous commit, so we couldn't join us. Next week, we plan to do the ranking of season one of Columbo as far as our favorite to least favorite episodes and like that, and it'll be interesting to see. So whether he joins us or not for that, we'll see, but let's get right into it here. The first thing I'll just talk about, as you usually start us off here, is that my initial reaction about this looking like a big budget film, there were some weird edits to me, meaning I could catch stuff, and there's some of the dissolves and transitions which are very blatant and in your face, but in a way not good. And I gotta simply say this, as we've mentioned before, me being an 80s kid, I remember some stuff with the 70s and, some tangentially stuff about the 60s. This whole transition from the 60s to the 70s is interesting because this was in early 71, I believe, when this came out and was filmed. Eventually was released in Europe like in the late 70s as a film. And I can see that. It feels like a film. It does not feel like a TV episode. It's not a bad thing, but it's unnerving to me, and I don't want to penalize it for it. But just the way it's filmed just doesn't look like a Columbo episode. It's hard to explain to me, but I was definitely captivated by Lee Grant, who gets us started off because she does something despicable, and I guess that means she's going to murder somebody here early on. Not the person we want murdered, or at least I do, but we're not there yet. Go ahead and take us away.
That's right. She cuts out little letters from magazines. Despicable. No. Right from the setup, we get to see Lee Grant, Leslie, as she's called in this story, as she is setting up a ransom note. Let's just start off with that. And once that's pretty much finished up, she's going ahead, she's waiting, she's preparing, and someone arrives. Who could that be? A man enters. Hello, honey. And bang! Lee Grant goes ahead and shoots her husband from across the room, and he hits the floor. She walks over, and she immediately starts wrapping him up. That I'm not usually one to go ahead and say anything about when it comes to strength or things like that. Like most of that could just be pushed aside. However, this was a fairly larger man than her. How did she do that alone? Is a bit what I'm wondering, because she takes him and puts him in the trunk of his car before driving him away.
You know, I will say this. I don't ever get too personal here on the Extreme Movie Show. I had this on this morning while I had made breakfast, was sitting there with the dogs, and my lady's on the other couch, and we're sitting there, and she's doing something or whatever, and she sees this on. She's like, "You're watching that old show again?" I'm like, "You betcha, honey. This episode's over 50 years old. It looks great. Great print, by the way, on Peacock." And you're right. This guy just gets whacked, and the first thing she goes is, "There's no way. She's much smaller than I am." I'm like, it's television, honey. Let it go. But unlike that thing, that's going to be one of several things we will not be able to let go, or at least I won't be able to later on. Because at first, this guy I thought looked a little bit like Walt Disney, but just going to throw that out there.
Walt Disney's now dead. Well, she takes the husband of not Walt Disney, puts it in the trunk, drives it, dumps it in the forest, and sets up the car in a position she wants before going back home. She calls a friend to say, "Hey, you're going to need to call me tomorrow to remind me about tennis. So just call and just say tennis tomorrow at a specific time." And then she just waits for her plot. So the next day she's in court, because this is a big time lady lawyer, and she is going with her case, but they've heard nothing from her husband. Where could he be? Strange.
It's pushing up daisies. He's assumed
Yeah.
room temperature. I mean, there's a lot of different things, but obviously, why is this high-profile female lawyer a woman in a man's world doing? And what the hell is she doing? Wears this weird grandma scarfy kind of outfit. I mean, it's really cool by 60s, 70s standards, and I love the pattern and tone, but a lawyer should not wear that, damn it. And I'm being serious about this. It's really throwing me for a loop because she seems very stoic. She doesn't seem mad or angry, upset, and you're like, this is a bit different. She's almost we've said cold, calculating, emotional with a lot of people. Most of the killers we've seen play it over the type. She's not. It's like she's hid that from it hitting her so far, is the way I took it.
So, little fun fact as we go ahead, and she tells her assistant, "Call the police."
You sound like Shatner for a brief moment.
Oh, well, that wasn't on purpose. As we go back into her house, they have the notes, they have these maps, they're all set for the drop, as it were. They're getting the money from the bank. She's going to sign for it, and she's hoping he's alive. That's at least what Miles here believes, because the federal agent helping is someone I recognize from Golden Girls.
Oh, is that right?
Played Rose's boyfriend.
He's wearing a classic gray, a medium blue combination with a slightly off shade blue. I'm not fond of the blue combinations or the same color combinations, but the gray blue is unbeatable in any man's wardrobe if you're Caucasian. She's got a lovely lavender type of very conservative kind of outfit on it. She's got a little bit of booty in her too, which is, okay, fitting for a woman in her 40s, but she's also, just very proper looking here too. But yeah, you could tell, I thought, honestly, just with her, the way it's shot, because there's weird angles here, but they're definitely showing the camera above the FBI. It's the FBI's in because it's a ransom, right? There's no murder yet. And so the camera's being shot over his shoulder, looking at her eyes. So she's looking up at the guy. She's not blinking, but you can tell she's professional. She's not hysterical, but she's almost seducing the guy just by the way she's looking at him, but not with that wide-eyed, doughy, innocent 19-year-old girl. Like, this is a very mature way of seducing the guy, because this guy's getting smitten with her, and we see her turn that on just a little bit in a future scene. So right off the bat, I thought, oh, is she going to work the FBI agent? Not sure, because the guy was very professional, telling her stuff, and of course, you're hearing things, but it's blah, blah, blah. You're watching their faces. They work together. I did think this was an interesting scene.
Yeah. And then, speaking of interesting scenes, she goes to the door because there's somebody there. Who could it be? A man squatted down, looking through the ground. It's Columbo. He dropped his pen, and they make this. He doesn't make a big deal about it. He's like, "Oh no, I lost my pen." It's only a big deal because it was engraved. But you know what? Don't worry about it. I'll get a new pen. I'll get it engraved. And then they go ahead eventually inside. He can't find the pen. It's gone. It's lost.
One observation and then a question for you about this whole exchange here. A lot of information goes on. It's our introduction to Columbo in this episode. The observation here is some of the first of the weird choppy edits to me, not the psychedelic stuff, which just isn't for my taste. I don't think it's effective in this episode. It's kind of a leftover relic, and it does seem like we're many years ahead from the last episode. To me, some of these scenes where the camera's behind Columbo and you see him in full frame looking at them talking, I'm like, this looks like he's just talking to a screen of something that's already been shot. The way it cuts back and forth, it's very distilling, and obviously everyone's ignoring him, and I guess that's the whole purpose of the way this whole scene is shot, including when he asks for some information at the table. But my question for you is, when he was out there looking for his missing pen, it was blah, 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 did you think he was looking for a clue at that point, or do you think he was literally lost his pen?
I felt like he literally lost his pen.
Okay.
Because he had no reason to suspect anything at that point. Like, he hadn't even met our friend the murderer here.
Right.
But once he goes inside and he's asking a couple questions as he's looking at the scene they have set up, this plot is a little much because the kidnappers have decided that our friend, the lady lawyer, Leslie, is going to fly a plane over a specific drop area and drop the $300,000. That's the plan.
You don't like it?
No.
What's unbelievable? So 300,000 in 1971. This is actually the year when I think we were signed off the gold standard, and we had massive hyperinflation, and everything got derailed in the 70s for whatever reasons. Whether you're an Austrian economist kind of guy, economist, I should say, or from the Chicago school, or you believe in modern monetary theory, stuff like that. It's 300,000 there. It's like at least $1 million probably in today's money. Seriously, 50 years ago. My God, this is over 50 years old. It's really good. But it's what I'm getting at is to be able to pull that kind of money out in that short period of time is no easy task. It's even harder to do that today with all the rules and regulations. But even back then, that's just a volume of money. But of course, we do find out later on that when she gets the money and puts it in her white satchel, because she suggests, oh, this should be fine, I'll just take this with me on that, because I'm a girl boss and I can fly, by the way. Not a Cessna, because that would be something else. This is something else. I imagine it's whoever gave paid advertising to be in the episode, because we do get some flying scenes in there, which are cool. But her rolling up all that cash there, from the briefcase into that, it's like, okay, that was really easy. So I'm only mentioning this to you because even though you're saying it's ludicrous and you're not sure why, it does feel ludicrous to me too. And I'm giving you reasons why. She's supposed to fly from California over the mountains there to where the desert begins in California. If you're familiar with it, after the mountain ranges, it all becomes desert. She's supposed to literally drop it, and then the kidnappers come, take the money, and that's it. But they're going to tail her and this and that, and they're all pretty much ignoring Columbo at this point, which is fine. She's just, you know, she's very subtle in the way she does it, because I was telling you how she, to me, is slightly seducing and working the guy over. Usually that's pretty blatant when you're watching television shows and they amp it up. Here they let her do it in a very hidden kind of way. And as a professional woman, you can't be overt like you normally will as a woman, sending signals out to attract a member of the opposite sex. But she's got, there's fireplaces going, it's getting late in the night, there's people outside, she feels safe. She sits on a couch, she pulls the thing over, talk about how cold the place is. The guy sits down next to her, they're turned catty corner. That's called mirroring if you're looking at it. She smiles slightly, it's the first sign of whatever about it. Of course, Columbo's making like he's got to take a dump because he wants to go take a look for the bathroom and all that and look around. And they're having a little intimate kind of conversation. And she's starting to, I'm just going, you know what? We have not seen this before out of a Columbo actor or actress, where they're doing a very good job of less is more in terms of their acting. And now it is, we've had the bombastic characters, and Roddy McDowall epitomizes going for 100. You know, he definitely does. I'm looking at Lee Grant going, at first she seemed really boring to me, and I'm like, uh-oh. And she proves me wrong later on. But right now, the scene, I'm going, okay, this is pretty cunning so far. I hope she's able to keep it up through the rest of the episode. But this is only when Columbo gets to start interjecting himself a little bit in all this too. I mean, it's a good 20, 30 minutes in and all that when they actually get the phone call. But the thing about the phone call is something I thought you'd pop at. Do you recognize what that is? I'm asking you because you're the young 20-something, and this is technology was advanced at the time.
Oh, no. I had never heard of the system.
So
no, I'm not going to lie.
Okay, so there's this is weird, right? Okay, but like, for example, you can set up everybody sets up a message on their answering machine, but you would have a cassette tape and you could say, hey, this is the Extreme Movie Show, I'm not here to take your call right now, but if you call me back at 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, I'll be sure, you know, and check it. You'd see that like in all that Scream in 1996. I think it was one of the first movies to me that really epitomized cell phones. Yeah, Sheriff, all the kids in town have them, and how that changed in movies. We've talked about that, right? This is one of the earliest kind of recording devices where you see her at the beginning. If you're not watching or paying attention to it, that you have to with these Columbo episodes, she's taking old what's called reel-to-reel tape, which is just cassette on a bigger scale, right? She's splicing it, which is what we do now when we're making our music and all that too, where we're cutting and pasting literally sections of it, and that's why there's no errors, because you know, old music, everything was recorded analog like this. So she's setting up where when the so-called ransom people call and she gets it, she's faking on it just like she did with her chick who set her up with the tennis conversation, and she's doing it. And I thought, well, how are they just going to do on reel to reel? No. If you're older like me, you're going to get off on this. There's a little looks like an index card, and it's got holes in it. That pixel is something that's called a punch card, because you would punch holes into it. And it's like old sheet music in a old stand-up piano, where a sheet of music would have the notes in certain orders and all that. And it's basically a unique punch-out pattern, right? That's one way of recording information. So she was able to do all that where it would come in at a certain time and call it. And that was the whole genius of it, because she could, you know, make it like, hey, I was in here in front of all of you at this time. That's kind of like her alibi in a way. And it's a fucking punch card. I'm like, my God, the things you have to do technology wise to put it in an episode. But she's obviously very smart. She's obviously very shrewd. We do find out she's a lawyer. We have no idea why she whacked her older husband, successful one, that wasn't really grouching at her or whatever. So it was a little different because of the technology, right? I mean, it's interesting. Yeah. It's dated because of that, but that's what it was. So these are rich people with rich devices doing what rich people do.
Killing their spouses and
exactly
making plots to take their money.
All we need now is a mistress, but we're not there yet.
No mistress.
They've got the money. They've done the flying, and I have to say this too, because it's something that popped me too. But this is where I thought some of the editing was weird. This is obviously in 71. The scene where they're actually in the station where she gets dressed to get on the plane to take her white carry-on case full of the cash. It's got one of the old halogen bulbs that you would see in industry and all that too. And it's weird because they've been around for a while, but you don't really see them. And so that whole lighting of big buildings and stuff like that. It just makes the room look a little weird and different, not unfamiliar, but it doesn't look like a TV episode, as Arthur explained. But what I really want to point out is if you go back and you look at this particular scene here, there's a chalkboard behind Columbo, and what is smart about a lot of these episodes is these scenes up to this point is even though Columbo's have things to say, he's not the main guy because it's not a murder yet. He's standing physically in the background or away from the group of people, which is, Lee Grant and the FBI agent, and then, one or two miscellaneous non-speaking doofuses just kind of standing around doing everything. But in the back, I'm looking at this blackboard, and it looks like a rectangle, and it looks like there's a perimeter around it, right? So it looks like a square, but it looks like on the inside there's another square, so there's a border. And I'm looking at that going, what the fuck is that? Because whenever anybody writes on a chalkboard, it's always pretty, it's always legible. What drew my attention was this is the old school chalkboard, the greenish kind, and I'm looking at what they wrote because it's not very legible. But when I freeze frame it and zoom in, I'm going, that looks like what we would call a calculus max min problem on the board, because, hey, if you've got 10,000 square feet to set up your farm, what's the way you can maximize it, from length and width and all that? How do you do it? And I'm looking at all this going, and they even have like a sine equation in here with an exponent and whatever. And I'm like, why the fuck is that doing in a plane thing? Normally you would see something with triangles and launch angles and that sort of stuff. And I'm going, is this just a room they just filmed in and just didn't even give a shit or not, or what? So when I mentioned to you before about choppy edits, the vocal dubbing on some things is a little off too. I'm not even complaining about the music in here, but that jumped out to me because it's a distraction. I'm going, why is this stupid chalkboard even visible in the scene? Why is it even there? It should have just been erased or something stupid put on there that your brain wouldn't have even registered. It's just, I don't know. It's just
something that hurts you.
Yeah, it's like I've said before about suits, because again, I mentioned a few of the suits in here. We got the 60s dress going on. A suit should not distract you from looking at the person's face. It should do exactly that. It should be so good looking and well fitted that you don't notice any errors, and as a result, your eyes go up to a person's face when you're watching them. Same thing with, like, I complained about her wardrobe in the scene where she's busting on the I'm going to be honest and say the middle-aged African-American individual who worked at a line there too, could support his family, basically accusing him of being on unemployment, being a bum, and that's why he fell downstairs, and no way in hell we're going to negotiate. But she does it in such a cold, calculating manner. We don't think she's able. She's just like, no, she's just good at her job. Her stupid outfit goes with her skin and all that. You're not looking at the outfit, you're looking at her face. So we still have some good standards here, but even Columbo, we did not mention what a big change from the first episode to this one, how he looks. He looks more like the Columbo we've seen so far with the way the hair is and all that. And it's only been 2 to 3 years since the first episode that this TV movie appeared. And I don't know, to me, it's just a lot of things really kind of jumped out. And it's the whole thing. I agree with you. I'm spending a bit of time on it here because it's important if you're watching the episode with what happens at the end, because the one thing that I've had an issue with too sometimes is, and I'll bring this up because this comes up again later, two things happen with Columbo. We saw him yell and get mad at somebody, and yeah, we talk about how the bad guys basically let it go because their ego gets in the way. But between, I think, 68 when the first episode showed and 71 when this one did, and then the TV show actually started late 71, I think, beginning of 72, whatever it was. I think that's when we had whatever the Supreme Court decision was. So you have to be read your rights, the Miranda stuff, if I recall that correctly, because there's a scene where he says, make sure you read her rights or whatever. That was a new thing. So they included it, which is great. But what draws my attention to that even more is they show him basically breaking into her locker looking for stuff, because obviously she plays the old switcheroo and she keeps the money. So you're like, what does a rich woman who whacks her well-to-do, allegedly, older husband, what does she need all this money for? Because as we see her turn around as she goes back home and all that, we have what's perhaps the worst character of all time, at least in these 2 episodes and all the regular season 1 episodes, the goddamn fucking stepdaughter. This woman actress was probably 19 or 20, if I read correctly on here. She's kind of got a nice body underneath that. She's not frumpy looking and all that, but she plays a spoiled, I'm sending my kid off to Switzerland, rich school girl that interjects herself in her, and stepmommy and her do not get along. And at this point, I'm going, I wish she murdered her rather than her husband, because she's, I guess, supposed to play the spoiled, privileged kid. You're not supposed to like her. She does a good job with that, Pixel, but the problem is we're supposed to be watching the murderer, which in this case is Lee Grant, going, how's she going to get away with it? How's her ego going to make her give it up like the guys did? And I'm excited because I kept saying, hey, I'm waiting to have a female be a killer, right? I mean, we kind of did see that in an episode, I believe, right? But this one, I'm going, man, she's crushing it, and she's so controlled. Why the hell did they do this? This is awful. This is the complete shit show as far as writing to me. And I'm saying that, and I'm being completely honest about it, because to me, so far, I like how Columbo hasn't been too much involved. Lee Grant's carrying everything. She's very strong. She plays a very strong woman, not one that's drinking heavily or dosed out on drugs like we saw in the one female episode. This woman is polished. She is an alpha woman in a man's world, and I'm loving what I'm seeing, right? What did you make of this character, and what would happen next?
So, I, at this point, after, because at the end here, after they do the drop, the shroud of a drop, and Columbo goes back, and it's almost like a rush to get to that locker to see if he can find the bag. No. He suspects that there's going to be something in there. That the bag of money is going to be waiting there. But we didn't talk about the thing that first set him off. Because that phone call all the way earlier, talking about the punch card auto calling machine, whatever it's called. But she went ahead, she picked it up, she knew every line, she was ready on time, but that's not the problem. The problem was she answered the phone and she didn't ask how her husband was. Are you okay? Nope. Didn't ask that. And Columbo tells Rose's boyfriend that.
Right. And so she just says that husband's name like a question, and that's it. So it's like, okay, that's that human nature nuance thing that Columbo brings to the table. I agree with you. We're definitely already through the first act here. The second act is revving up. Very noticeable scene.
But yeah, after that, going through this long flight, and the flight looks fine, but it felt far too long of a scene for me.
I agree with you.
It's
by the way,
dark.
And it's at night, right?
Yeah, it's all dark.
We're gonna show off some extra minutes because of paid sponsorship.
And then yes, after Columbo isn't able to get the bag of money that's tied in the locker, but we get to go home and meet the stepdaughter, and the stepdaughter, she looks like she could be a nice, lovely young lady, but she really, really hates her stepmother, and that's pretty damn clear.
But do we know why?
I mean,
she has all the trappings of accoutrement of the privileged class. So should we expect her to be a little snobby? She's not a bad-looking woman. She's dressed very frumpy. Okay, I get it. She's coming from Switzerland. Maybe it's cold at that time, I guess, and she's on break. I don't remember if it's the summer. I don't really give a rat's ass because I'm looking at her and it's instant hatred. And part of it has to do, I think, is, again, I don't want to blame the actress so much as here. They told her you're going to be this character, play it this way. So she does it. That's what they wanted. But it sounds like one of those, it sounds like if we're talking through an episode, like if you and I were talking and you're like, ha, 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 Mr. Extreme, that's all you're going to get from me. And I go, yeah, I guess you're right. Oh, by the way, there is just one more thing. That's what it sounds like here. It's awful. It's not, get the introduction right. At least make that the best acted scene so you can have that instant credulity. If not, it's going to sit in you like it did me.
I mean, I don't know.
Horrible. It's far worse than Roddy McDowell's character.
Because,
at least he had a sense of humor.
Because this whole the start of that scene, she's clearly not wanted by her stepmother. But at the end of it, after she says, "Oh, but Margaret, I love him too. I'm afraid. I'm really afraid." And the daughter buys it.
That is good. I'm telling you, Lee Grant's crushing it.
And so we think that she's going to go ahead because it's very clear the reason why she goes to school in Switzerland and she stays away is because of that stepmother.
We're told this, yeah.
No. I felt that right from the beginning.
Well, okay, that's what I'm saying. It's not established. We still don't have a motive here.
No, that comes later in a diner. But it's the next day. Still nothing from the kidnappers. What a surprise.
Oh, one more thing. No pun intended. Aren't we at the point here where Columbo, when he had broke in there, and all that, because he was looking for stuff, wasn't he surprised at this point, or is that later, where the money, the $300,000, why we hear him explain it later, I know that, but he's looking for, he's going, why did they take the cash and not the bag? If you got a drop, why are you going to run out there and not just grab the whole bag and leave? So the seeds are planted, right?
Yeah.
But then we're here in the room where Columbo comes in, and this is where we find out, that he's dead, I think, and she's got her lawyer assistant that's helping out, but she's wearing this fur coat. I don't get it. You go from granny hand knitted dress, which is nice, but not in a courtroom. She's dressing down and telling the person, "Hey, this is how you're going to act, so I can win your case." And I'm ignoring you because she's so good, she doesn't really have to pay attention on who her client is, and yet her hair could be more professionally done, but it's still nice. But she's wearing this. It's just not right. Pixel, that's what I'm telling you. It's weird to me. Why the hell is she wearing this in the friggin' courtroom? I don't get it. It's got the huge, 4-inch cuffs. It's got the big thing.
It's attention to herself. That's why she's wearing an outfit that goes ahead and calls your attention, but it's going to call the attention of everybody because
she's not dressed this way at all in the entire episode, and we're almost halfway through. It makes no sense to me at all.
But this is the scene that she's trying to sell everybody on, because that's when Agent
Lovestruck,
yes, comes in and says, "Can we talk in private?" "No, you could tell me anything. You could tell me right here, right now. What's wrong?" "He's dead." And she she falls dramatically into the chair. She can't believe it. She's heartbroken, shocked, and Columbo's watching. And so they go ahead and they get her out for the day, and it's just like, there we go. Let's go ahead and you're going through so much. Let's get you out of here. And Columbo goes ahead and tells Agent Lovestruck, basically, I wonder why she's been able to keep herself so calm, cool, keep herself well composed, but here in front of all these people, she loses it.
Mm-hmm.
And the agent basically tells Columbo, back off. If you're going to imply that she has something to do with the kidnapping, go ahead and say it, but you're going to need to leave this woman alone. It's like, okay. And I do love that Columbo says, excuse me, agent, before we were dealing with a kidnapping, but now we're dealing with a murder, and I think that's my territory.
That's the big fuck you.
Yeah, I loved it. It was great. Oh, that line's stuck with me.
And you know what's great too? They have the funeral, and we see her out of that garish, tension-drawing outfit she's got in the courtroom. To, of course, everybody wearing black, and they have the funeral. So I'm like, okay, funerals and cemeteries, regardless of what you may or may not think about them or religious stuff and all that, they look good, I think, on television or movies, right? They're a thing. We all know what it's like if we've been to them. There's a feel to them and all that. And so finally, misentitled or whatever, comes over, says something to her, and I was surprised, really cool wind up, bam, big bitch slap on the stepmom, and storms off or whatever. And it's like, okay, something happened finally halfway through this fucking episode. Something's starting to happen. This episode feel like it hasn't started picking up pace yet. It's like you're doing a 1,500-meter race and you're just at cruising speed waiting for your kick at the end. Because again, okay, let's let it lead to something. What's going to happen? There's something going on with the ladies here. We still don't have motive. Okay, that's fine. This is different. It's okay. Lee Grant's tremendous. But we get the shot of basically everybody dissolving from that, and you've got Columbo with his back, not visible to where everybody is at because he had witnessed the slap or whatever. And then we get, Miss Mopey, walking on the grass, who just happens to walk by the exact same place where he's at, where they can have the conversation, where he gets so heartfelt with her and walks up to her and comforts her like old daddy and says, anything you need at all, I'm here for you. And even does the old like forearm, elbow squeeze kind of reassurance thing or whatever. And I'm like, that's not fucking Columbo. I get he's old school, talks about his wife and makes stuff. It's not. I'm just not buying it. This is not. Who's wearing your clothes, Peter Falk? Who's writing this fucking episode? This is garbage. And then at the post-op party or whatever like that, Lee Grant turns up a notch because she's like, "Hey, bitch, come down here at the stairs. Oh, by the way, you're gonna act like a big girl. I'm gonna treat you like one. I'm gonna let you know that hey, your trust fund." It's gone. We had to liquidate stuff because you're a fucking minor. So fuck you. Maybe you ought to go back to Switzerland, you dumb bitch. Go get a part-time job and make some cash. She doesn't use those words, but she does it so well. It's like, holy crap, Lee Grant. This is great. You're really winging it out here. Totally different than all the guys we've seen before in the one woman. I'm starting to appreciate her role a bit more because, again, we're halfway through. Nothing's going on. And I've got change the channel pain and anguish coming out of me because of spoiled girl. But go ahead.
The thing after the courtroom is they get Lee Grant home. They come and they try to go ahead and say, we're so sorry, we're here for you. And a doctor there goes ahead and gives her some sleeping pills. This will help you sleep for the next few nights. Go ahead, take it. And they leave her there. And then as soon as they're gone, she goes ahead, she opens the pills, she looks at them after rattling around and tosses them in the fireplace. And she's just kind of moving and grooving through the living room. And that's when the stepdaughter comes down because she's also feeling the trauma of the situation. She goes ahead, she comes down, and she can see her stepmother basically partying right there in the living room. And then it cuts to the funeral, and that leads to the slap because it wasn't just her existence that made her like, but it built up to that. And I don't know. I maybe you're right. It was a little much about Columbo trying to comfort the girl, but it didn't bother me too much.
It doesn't. It's just fucking convenient. The cash, the extended flying the plane time that you talked about. I absolutely 100% agree because that's going to happen a second time in here. I think, by the way, which we'll talk about here in a moment. However, it's just we're starting an idea of what's going on here, and now we know. Okay, now there's a murder. Columbo can amp things up. Now we'll get more of it. I think one of the best scenes in the episode, though, does come up here because she goes back to work, basically, and Columbo goes to see her. And this is the world of Columbo that I'm used to. The big, giant office, he walks in there. There's always a conversation within the conversation about things a little bit here, which is pretty good. Is she going to yield? Is something going to come up? This is when he sees the voice recorder phone, whatever you want to call it, and all that too, writes it down, still can't find a pencil or pen to write it. And this is where I go, okay, this is feeling now, this scene, like a Columbo episode. And Lee Grant's, like I said, been tremendous. I can't stand the daughter-in-law or the stepdaughter, but this is where you really get a good example of how it works if you weren't familiar with it. And that's why I mentioned it earlier, what's going on. But okay, now we get Columbo on screen. We don't have to have a lot in the episode for it to feel like an episode, but I think these two talking back and forth, this is when the episode starts to me. You're about almost an hour in. Seriously, you're over the 50-minute mark. She's great in this scene. This is a Columbo episode. Things are happening now.
Yeah. He goes ahead after seeing the machine, brings up the bag. It's really bugging the bag. But that's how he wanted to go ahead and show. That's how my mind works. I wanted to show you my idiosyncrasies. Then he goes ahead and he brings up the second thing that's bothering him. Her husband was shot at a 45-degree angle, which means, because she's standing in the room, he goes ahead and says, "We're just standing right here. The killer was sitting from a chair, and boom." And all during this, she's having like these flashes of the killing that she did. And she actually gets a little bothered. I feel like when she asked for water, though, that was a mistake. Because if it were a man in her role, they would have gone ahead and said, "Go ahead, pour me a bit of brandy." Something to calm the nerves.
Yeah.
But water will do.
Well, she is on the job.
I know. But even for TV.
She's acting up even again a second time like she did when she got the bad news.
No. She's not. No.
You don't think so? You didn't take it that way?
Otherwise, they wouldn't have intercut the actual killing when he's explaining. That's to go ahead and show that she is feeling some sort of trauma from killing him.
Well, I think one of the more interesting things about here is because what's a little different about, again, having a woman as the killer here and a strong woman like she is, and the way she's doing it where she could very easily be hysterical or under the influence or take on masculine traits like drinking at the sign of distress and she's trying to stay composed, throwing the drugs out. I appreciate all that. Here she's in her element. It is her office, so Columbo's at the disadvantage. And at this point, obviously, he's suspecting her, it seems like. I think that's fairly obvious to sit there and say, but he can't come out and tell a lawyer that. So how does he get it out of her? And, of course, it's going to be out of the same way he's done out of everyone, by getting them to basically talk. So they have this little back and forth where, he mentions that, like, hey, I've been a cop for a really long time. At some point, you get to start used to your inner voice, that knows that just presses you on things and how he's weird and blah, 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 and all that too. And this is where she starts going, hey, I got to pay attention to this guy. He's not a lug. He's not somebody I can just kind of stare at and the guy automatically thinks I like him. I don't have to do anything like that. This is where, like I say, that all of a sudden, if the episode were asleep at this point or under drugs, now the hangover's over and things are happening. But it's interesting because the way he does it is he does it in such an earnest manner without being sarcastic about, well, just tell me some stuff about your husband. Basically, I hate to be so insensitive, but, did he have enemies? He's very successful. We find out that her husband is actually a pretty, I don't want to say nice guy because that's not the right. He's an outstanding guy. She's younger, or she's a little younger, but not completely younger. But the fact that he knows how to fly, he's well respected by the people that work for him. He's not an asshole. He's basically a guy that's busted his ass, worked really hard to get where he's at, and did it the right way, is how it seems like. So you're like, okay, so now what's the reason for why she wants to kill him? We still don't know. That makes it interesting to me from the adult perspective, and also how does he get a woman like this to kind of say some stuff and let her appear to believe that he's going to approach this in a way that she would already know in her professional experience how a cop like him would approach it, which is, the enemies list, right? Was he having affairs, that sort of thing, which is always plausible and everything too. And of course, the one thing they never say in these episodes is 99 times out of 100 that's somebody and it's usually a family member, as we'll find out. But I thought this exchange was evident. It really was a quantum leap compared to any of the scenes we've had before.
I do want to say the hearing about her husband reminds me of Ralph.
How so?
No, because of because we didn't talk about it, but she goes ahead and says, "You know what, Columbo? You want to talk to me? Absolutely. Let's go do it while flying."
Yep.
And she kind of forces Columbo to fly the plane for a while too. But no, after that, hearing about how she thought of her husband, he goes ahead and he talks about, I had a cousin, Ralph. Everybody loved Ralph.
Oh, yeah.
Ralph's great. He was
Ralph's the man. Ralph can do anything.
But he was
Anything we can do, Ralph can do better.
damn boring. Such a bore.
Yeah.
And Columbo knows. She was just bored of she was bored of her good husband.
When I heard that, I will say, well, two things. One, way too much flying here. And now at the time, these shots of seeing a plane in flight and everything, big deal, breathtaking. I don't mind getting lost in these flying things. I don't. And I think it's a California thing too. I got no problem with it at all, actually. We get to see her in her element. He obviously hates flying. I'm not a big fan of it myself. I thought he acted well in here, but it went too long. It was unnecessary for what they were going to do. But yeah, the whole thing with Ralph, where he gives one of those anecdotes there as when they get off the plane, is interesting because I go, oh, boredom. That's absolutely 100% why a woman would do anything, you know, and as sexist as that sounds, for the feels of it, just because whatever, we don't know why she married an older guy, but she did. So is it bedroom stuff? Is it, you know, because she's in her early 40s as a professional, she's, you know, going through a midlife crisis, aka menopause or something like that. Stuff that from the female perspective still doesn't get talked about a lot today. And also back then in the 70s, a woman in this role and all that, how is she supposed to survive under the pressure, being successfully like she is in a man's world? And more importantly, as we're learning, in the shadow of her ex-husband, because that's something where I was going, wait a minute, is she having an affair with a young guy that's an attorney that Columbo talks to? Because Columbo's like, you know, are you the secretary basically? And he's like, no. But just then, Pixel, when things look like they might start picking up pace, we get a bit of a different scene, which I like, because we go to Barney's brewery or dinery, beanery, excuse me, I apologize. And this is a fabulous shot. It's the best filming shot. You see a shot of Columbo at a pool table, and he's running 3 balls in one continuous take, coming around the corner, and I'm not done describing it because he's with a bunch of guys there. I'm like, okay, this is a way to characterize somebody, give him, and he nails it all in one shot. And when he hits the 3rd ball, it does the double rail thing, and he scratches. That is not easy to do. You can tell by the stick. He's like Chichi Rodriguez, for all you golfers out there that know the old guy. He'd walk up to the ball to hit it. He didn't have a waggle. He didn't spend 5 minutes figuring out what to do before hitting the ball. He's going up and hitting it. He goes up and he orders the chili, and we find out that, you know, well, hey, you don't have much of an imagination, aka boring. You know, you always order the chili. He's like, what do you have? He's like, I'll have the chili. But the guy that's talking to him takes the menu while he's talking to him. And again, this is an edit thing. I'm watching it. This is all one take. He's trying to put it in the thing by the ketchup, which they turn the Heinz bottle so you don't see the labels. And he barely gets it in there, and they go get it. I'm like, okay, this is cool. But then it gets ruined because we got semi-fied 50% sexed up stepdaughter coming in, who definitely could be, you know, va va voom if they let her be that way. She just shows up out of the blue next to him while he's getting his chili to talk. I don't remember if they had a phone call or if they talked. She just somehow magically, by the writer's power, knows he's there. And she's getting sexier and hotter as the episode goes on. I'm like, is this something? They're putting her hair back. They're putting her in form-fitting clothes. She was very frumpy. Is she blossoming into a woman because she's, you know, standing up to her mother-in-law? Is there some theme with that? And there's a partial answer to that is yes. But they get the chili, and it's a great-looking bowl of chili with the crackers, and he's playing her. She's like, wants to go to the booth and talk, and they have a conversation. I'm looking at this, Pixel, and I know you said you thought some stuff was and you're a lot more generous than I am. This is absolutely incredible, incredibly bad.
Yeah, it's not great. I was going to say earlier when I was first watching it, that entire exchange from before where stepmother is being like, listen here, maybe you need to get a job. We don't have as much money as we used to. The whole thing about that scene is, depending on the context of the situation, the mother and the stepmother wouldn't be evil. It would be a spoiled brat thing, but we know it's not because the stepmother's an evil bitch. That's the difference. That's the key difference.
I like the fact she basically, I was thinking, okay, maybe she hated the husband because maybe the husband spoiled the original daughter and she's jealous. That's a simple motive, right? Because she liquidated the trust fund. But here's the thing: we're getting close to the end of this episode, and we're going to be wrapping up here in a couple of minutes. So as things are picking up, the big thing here that happens is Columbo basically lets the stepdaughter know, hey, we got to have evidence. I can't tell you what to do. This blah, blah, blah. She's really, really smart. But, the keys is something I couldn't find because it wasn't in the car when we found the body. And why wouldn't they be? Blah, blah, blah. Kind of like in the one episode where the person had on classical music versus the blues country kind of music was a big tell from here. We have the keys things missing. So we get this really stupid scene where she goes on her own because she's fucking Nancy Drew, and she finds the keys. She yells at Mama. Mama comes at her. She pulls a fucking gun, shoots at her. She's like, oh, I guess that was a blank. Maybe the next one's real. And they go through this histrionic thing of all that. And Columbo comes in. He's like, hey, you can't be doing this. And he admonishes her. It's like, what the fuck is going on here?
Because he says that because she planted the keys. They weren't really her father's keys.
I'm just saying, this is a dumb scene.
This thing, it's not
straight trash, bro.
It's not great.
Straight trash.
But afterwards, because it looks like we're almost to the end of it all. We do get another scene in which taking place in the office that Columbo pops in and says that, oh, well, I've been taken off the case. I wanted to let you know. Goodbye. But we get another scene of her telling Columbo, basically, you hide behind your frumpy attire and your friendly manner. You are very likable, but it's always the but, because he's pestering her. But he says he's done. It's over. But she goes home and speaks to the stepdaughter, and the stepdaughter says that, you know what I want? I want what was coming to me. And she says that she wants money. She'll fly back to Switzerland if she gets what she
they negotiate
a
fair price.
Yeah. So they go to the airport the next day. They go to ship her off. She goes behind.
She leaves.
Yeah, it looks like it's over. But who's waiting there? It's Columbo, and she's feeling mighty good. So she's like, you know what, Columbo? Here, let me go buy you a drink, because she thinks she got rid of the stepdaughter. Her problems are away.
Let me say this. Wherever this place is at, I wish flying was this cool like it was back in the day, because this is a moderately mid-sized, airport. I don't know if that would be Ontario or some outskirts of LA or wherever this would be, or if this is a set piece. I don't know, don't care, because I love how everybody's dressed fashionably like they did back in the 60s and 70s. You're not going into a bar. You're not going into a diner. You went into a beanery. Here you're going into a place where you don't get beer, liquor. It's not a restaurant. It's not a pub. It's a place where you get cocktails. So she orders one and he gets a root beer. This is tremendous. I'm loving this scene.
Yep.
This, by the way, is the final scene.
And the key thing is, after he goes ahead, orders his root beer, he says, I almost missed it. But I realized the key thing was getting you to spend even just a little bit of the money. And that's when we could see this guy from the ticket counter behind, not the TSA, but whatever you could go ahead and call it back then.
Mm-hmm. Ticket booth.
But yes, behind the ticket booth, but holding this large box. We could see him there. And so he followed the stepdaughter in, and he collected the briefcase that was filled with cash. And went ahead. The guy steps into the cocktail lounge, sets it on the table, and that Columbo explains, this is what I needed, because they went through everything, every bill, to make sure the serial numbers, they had trackings on it, but that's what he needed. That was the final play.
We find out that there's no necessary real ulterior motive, like she was having an affair. The guy was a solid guy. Okay, so there's a little bit of a variation on a theme for why she does what she does. Kind of doesn't really like the young girl. Kind of still don't really know why. It's unfortunate because I felt like there could have been something here with the family dynamic, and I don't think it's there at all. I'm not saying this is rushed, because obviously this is a second one, so I think they had to amp up the weirdness and the violence, for lack of a better term, by 70 standards, because it had to be successful enough before it would become into a TV show, which ultimately it did. So I thought she was fantastically Grant. I'm not knocking the actress, but I just don't like the way this is written. Way too many convenience things. There's a lot to dislike about this episode. It's a slog to get through relative to other Columbo episodes. It makes me go, hey, that Roddy McDowell episode really wasn't that bad. I mean, seriously, especially because we got spoiled with so many good ones in season one. So that's it, ladies and gentlemen. It's been interesting going over Columbo for season one and these two pilot movies. Next week, we're going to rank all of them so far up to this point in our worst to best type of order. What were you going to say there, Pixel?
It's not a great episode. It didn't bother me half as much as just some of the things in here. Yeah, you're right. The Roddy McDowell, it was ridiculous because of the cigars going ahead, blowing up. That was silly. That was silly. But it wasn't convenient. Everything in here had some level of convenience for either the killer or Columbo to go ahead and work that out. And it's like, that's just a little much. That's a major problem with this episode. But it was still enjoyable.
I would simply say that I don't know. I hope Lee Grant's in a future episode, because I know sometimes we've heard that some actors come back for a second or potentially third role over the seasons. Love to see what she can do with that, because I thought she was the best thing about this episode. Obviously, Columbo's the anchor, doesn't have to be the main character, so we're looking at other things. But by far, she's up there. She did a great job with what she did. I really appreciate it. That she was the only reason worth watching this episode, in my opinion. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Next week, once we've kind of cooled down, meaning me, it'll be interesting to rank these pixels. So we'll start from the worst and then go up to the best and see how that goes. Until then, ladies and gentlemen, have a good night. Stay extreme. Thanks for watching, listening, retweeting, letting people know that we exist. Our Columbo episodes have been popular. Was surprised at the reaction with a show that's over 50 years old. Love it. Good night now.
Good night. This was not a Dan Curtis production.